Hello, everyone. Welcome to Monday morning or Monday afternoon, depending on where you are. My name's Matt Call. I'm a PM architect on the Intune team, and I'm joined today by two of my friends, Laura and Mike. Laura, do you want to go first and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks everyone for joining us today. My name is Laura Aritza. I'm a product manager on the Microsoft Intune team, and I primarily work in our security management space to bring you all of our joint scenarios with Defender.
Awesome.
Cool. And I'm Mike Donosky. I'm also a PM on the Intune team. Focus traditionally around a lot of policy and some of our security scenarios, more of our policy backend, but also more recently endpoint privilege management and some of our cool Copilot scenarios and agents that we've lit up over the past year or so. So yeah, it's been a busy time coming back from Ignite. It feels like it, was just here. And so yeah, it's been a good time taking a lot of that feedback that we got from Ignite and some of the awesome announcements that we had. So hopefully we'll get some questions about that today. Yeah, I'm going to hand it back to you, Matt.
Yeah, great. You fed right into the first question here from Rodney from Florida. Rodney's asking, you guys are really spending a lot of time. I'm going to paraphrase for Rodney here. He says, you guys are spending a lot of time on Copilot and AI and integrating that into the product. It's been really helpful to see some of the translations from AI, to show me kind of what I should be setting in my environment, what these settings do, what they mean. So, we'll start off with you, Mike. Mike, I know you've been spending a lot of time trying to meld sort of, the 15 or 16,000 settings in the settings catalog to, enterprise configurations and helping people deploy those. So can you talk a little bit about, how you've been going about sort of infusing the settings process with AI and sort of the work that's been going on there?
Totally. Yeah. So if you look back 2 years of the 2024 Ignite, you saw a lot of our scenarios were around some of the fundamentals in policy. So you saw things like summarizing policy with Copilot, where Copilot would go back and find information about impact for certain settings and call out, the groups that certain settings or policies are assigned to and things like that. And so really a lot of our initial investment is around teaching Copilot about Intune. That's kind of the best way to paraphrase it. You can ask about settings and whatnot. And it's a more of like a canned prompt response where you give a setting or a policy and you get question back or response back. You can ask a few follow-up questions. What we focused on for the past year, pretty much since 2024 Ignite, we really went and looked at what are some scenarios where we can really bring in the power of Copilot and a lot of the stuff that it can do behind the scenes, especially with a lot of the new agent capabilities. And so this year at Ignite, what you will have seen is the ability to create policy through Copilot or Security Copilot. And so what this looks like for us is we created an entry point where you can go in, once you turn the agent on, you can give it either a natural language prompt. You can say, hey, can you help me create a policy that has all the settings that are required for this type of scenario? Or, here's the problem that I'm trying to solve. You can even upload a compliance document. So parts of, if you have a list of all the settings that need to be set, you can go through and apply that as well, and that gets appended to your prompt. And then what we do is we come back with matched settings. The matched settings will come back and say, hey, here's all the settings that have matched what your requirements are. We'll even come back and tell you unmatched settings. So let's say the security doc that you uploaded has some reg keys in there that are no longer, they're either not available in Intune or maybe they're sort of on the side of what you can actually do with device management. We'll come back and tell you that as well with some justification and some citations. And then from there, after you look at sort of the matchings, you can go through and create a policy. Right now, we do settings catalog specifically. And then you can sort of interact with some more of those Copilot scenarios as you go and build out and deploy your policy. And so it used to be, 2 monitors, Excel spreadsheet, or your source doc over here, and you're sort of clicking and adding settings and things like that, and making sure everything's configured. We just wanted to streamline that. And so with the agent, you can streamline your policy creation. And then where we're going from there is really exciting. There's some things I can't share yet, some things I can share, file limit. People gave us some feedback on file limits and file types. And of course, we're working on these things, as well as some of the matching. So, and as well as, this will be our sort of spin into endpoint security is, there's more than just settings catalog when you create policy. So we're looking at how we can create policy not only for settings catalog, but also tell you where you might need a template like an endpoint security template to really get that full management or experience around the feature you're trying to light up or the security tool that you're trying to use. So that's Copilot skills for a lot of the foundation stuff behind the scenes, and then the new agents to help you create policy. And then you'll see us take those foundational pieces and sort of expand on those, where we're looking at, automated audits that turn into automated policy, drift correction, and stuff like that. So we're doing a lot of exploration right now. We're really excited for the next chance we get to come out and show folks what we're working on.
That's great. And you mentioned specifically the security management stuff. Laura, you work a lot on the AV policies, the EDR policies, what we traditionally call like endpoint security management. And, since we built the Defender for Endpoint Security Management for Defender for Endpoint for Microsoft, I don't remember what the name is, but the point here is, we have an easy way for our MDE onboarded devices to get security management from Intune without needing to fully onboard those devices. But, we have a question that, once you get in, you start deploying your AV, your EDR, your firewall policy. A lot of people want to do more. So, the first question or second question here we have from the tech community is someone asks, I've started applying the security policies for Defender for Endpoint using MDE, but now I want to migrate to Intune management. So, how should they think about migrating to Intune management once they have these devices in the Defender for Endpoint scenario, and now they want to go and get, compliance policy or maybe app deployment, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about how that works and what customers should expect?
Yeah, for sure. So what you had sort of mentioned about a scenario that we support for devices that are not necessarily Intune managed, but onboarded to Defender, the kind of term or slogan that we call that is MDE attach. I think it has more of an official name and documentation, but we'll use MDE attach for now. That's really awesome because for Windows devices, Windows Server and Linux Server, we also support through those platforms. But for Windows endpoints and Mac endpoints, they can be in sort of that state where they're not necessarily Intune enrolled, but still have the ability to get endpoint security policies through the same sort of management workflow to go and create an Intune policy and actually do the targeting to those specific devices that are managed by MDE and in sort of this MDE attached state. You can actually choose to create intro groups for targeting those based on specific tags that go into the group and sort of do that. And what's really awesome is as we've built into the sort of lifecycle management of this feature is making sure that once those devices get fully managed by Intune, if you have those policies already set up and sort of targeted to those groups that contain them, you don't actually have to do anything super special. We've made migration really, really easy, where once those devices are now fully Intune managed, the same policy that you would have targeted to your MDE attached devices, that is now just updated in the targeting, and the same policy object can apply to those ones that are now managed by Intune. So you'll still see sort of the same object in your device lists. The management fields will now update to Intune, and you can sort of have a smooth process so that you're not losing any protection with the policies or things that you've already set up. That's sort of a really smooth process to get the full capabilities of what Intune offers for those devices. And again, not lose any protection in the process. And from there, you can go and use some of the capabilities that Intune has that you might not have gotten before. And again, just have that in a clear view as you're going through that migration phase.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you just enroll them into Intune, magic, secured devices, right? Like this is basically it, like magic, right? It's awesome. And I think if I remember correctly too, like if for some reason your devices become unenrolled from Intune and you're already deploying security management, I think MDE will pick back up, right? And keep enforcing policy. Am I remembering that right?
Yes, the main goal, P0 in all of this, is you will not lose your protection. We don't want to like bring you guys back a few steps. This is really thoughtfully taken care of in the logic going between management states.
That's awesome. So there you have it, tech community. It's just protected. You don't have to do anything else. It's fine.
You could get that magic portion you mentioned really comes down to your targeting, right? Like you can, the cool thing about Intune that's always been cool is you can target users, and as they enroll devices, you know, you can use separate device targeting than user targeting. You can target everything. You can sort of over target with dynamic groups and Entra and say, hey, as new devices come in, automatically drop them into Defender. But these are the ones I'm going to enroll, and you can target your policy in such a way that as they enroll in Intune, they just magically get switched over. But then if you're targeting users with Defender, if they're taking other devices on, or you have, edge management scenarios and stuff where maybe the device isn't fully enrolled, but you're managing pieces of it, you can really make sure that you're sort of deploying that full canvas of devices that are in different states. You could also lock it down and say, like, you know what, we actually want all devices to be in this state, and sort of block things with your compliance policy and conditional access and whatnot to get to a good spot. So it's all about the grouping. Matt said magic, but grouping is magic. Confirmed. So
yeah, that's why we specifically have our policy templates. When you go to create a policy, it's just for the platform. The settings are the same if you're applying for MD attached devices or fully Intune enrolled. That's part of the reason why you just have one object. And again, as Mike said, it comes down to the targeting.
Yeah, and the members of the groups that you're targeting. Absolutely. Yeah, you don't have to like create the policy in any special way. We get that question a lot, actually, which is interesting. So
awesome. Yeah, I think this is a nice fold in here to the next question. It's a question around pre-provisioning and autopilot and Defender policy, but I think I'm going to sort of flip it around here a little bit. So I'll ask you both, you know, we have features like enrollment time grouping now for the Windows and Android platforms, you know, and then we have a bunch of settings that we're trying to apply, you know, to a device when it's enrolled. So first, it's sort of two-part question. The first is there anything special that needs to be done in the autopilot scenarios to ensure that devices get policy quickly? And secondly, like, you know, any specific targeting that you see people do for autopilot devices to make things apply more faster? You know, that's proper English probably. So yeah. So yeah, just open that up to you too. Like, you know, it looks like the question is more trying to make sure that they have policies and Defender for Endpoint apply very quickly through autopilot. So yeah, how do you group autopilot devices? How are you guys seeing that in the wild with policy? And then secondly, like anything special?
Yeah, with autopilot, with the status page, you can basically block the user experience until they get into a certain state. And someone the question here called out compliance, and you can also do things like using conditional access. So it depends on sometimes it depends on your requirements. You say like, hey, you can't have access to desktop until this, and this. And if you're thinking about it in a layered approach, then you can also have your conditional access policy saying, and then also until, you know, you're compliant by these measures. And sometimes it's great for folks to get, especially during provisioning, to get up and running fast. But if you have requirements around certain things, it's also good to make sure that those are layered in correctly. They're layered in correctly, not incorrectly, so that you're sort of gating management and access, which is just good security practice. As far as policy targeting, when people ask me about, you know, are users better than devices, the only thing that sort of makes a difference is a device will check in before the user signs in, and we don't necessarily know who the user is at that point. So device targeted policy could be a little bit faster. Like if you're doing some performance tuning during autopilot, you know, the person's already put in their username and password, or they've authenticated. And once they've authenticated, we know who the user is. So sometimes device targeting can be a little bit quicker, but it just depends. It's a perception thing sometimes, because you know there is benefit, as we kind of were just talking about, to targeting users as well. So there's as soon as the user signs in, we'll do another sync and get more policy and whatnot. And especially right around provisioning, the check-in schedule and all the syncing is accelerated and numerous. So right around that time, we're really sensitive to making sure everything gets down quickly. But yeah, sometimes device is faster than user, but in that case, it shouldn't really be perceived. Anything
Awesome.
to add that I missed, Laura or Matt? Pre-provisioning's come a long way. Pre-provisioning's come a really long way.
I think people generally they want to use pre-provisioning so that object can be staged in the directory and can be pre-grouped and pre-targeted, and I think that's great. I'd say that our policy targeting system is relatively quick compared to some other workloads that could be in Intune. So generally speaking, I mean, I don't see a lot of people struggle with getting policy applied quickly. Compliance is a whole other thing that can happen, especially when you're taking compliance from outside sources. Laura, did you have anything else to add? Because otherwise I'm going to pivot to the next question here, which sort of folds into this.
No, I think you guys kind of covered it.
Dynamic groups is the only other point I'd call out. Like if you think about the structure on like how you've built out targeting, if there's a dynamic group in there somewhere, that's going to take processing time. So the cool thing about pre-provision is you can do direct groups before. So that's the one tune you can make.
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to fold in a quick question from Ian here. He's asking is this all E5 stuff we're talking about? Intune is in E3 in the star 3 SKUs, the star 5 SKUs. MDE has a P1 product, which includes security management, which is in the E3 SKUs. And then Defender for Endpoint, the full protection suite, is part of E5, which will fold into the next question, which is around risk. Asking, can we provide greater clarity regarding the distinctions between medium, high, and other risk levels? Concerned that overly stringent Defender requirements may adversely affect the overall Intune MDM user experience. So, Laura, do you want to take that one? How we get these signals from Defender and sort of how that works. I can add some things here too if it helps. You let me know how you want to proceed.
Yeah, so Defender are the ones that are sort of defining the low, medium, high risk tolerances. I think they have lots of documentation and sort of information about what those sort of correlate to. In terms of best practices for balancing productivity and security, I mean, that's really up to the organization and what other sort of protections or compliance settings that you have in place for yourself. So I think that's really up to the organization to decide what that right strike of productivity versus security is. Yeah, Matt, if you want to jump in on any other guidance items.
Yeah, so it's important to remember that Defender for Endpoint uses a pretty standardized contract we have with mobile threat defense vendors. We have a number of integrations. I'm not going to try and name all the other companies we integrate with because I'll forget one, but I'm sure it's in our documentation. But anyway, they generate sort of the risk level that they want to, that they see for the threats, and they send us that message, and we use that in compliance policy. It's important to note that that's an escalation and de-escalation channel. So as quickly as it can escalate, it can also de-escalate in the same amount of time. So if it takes a minute for them to send us a signal that says something is high, no matter who the vendor is, when that signal goes down to low, we get it in the same amount. Generally, what we see people do here in this space is they start out with a policy that says must be at high or lower, which you might go, Matt, everything's high or lower. Like, this doesn't make any sense. The important thing here with high or lower is what you're telling the system is, hey, I have to be getting some signal from my threat vendor, whether it's Defender for Endpoint or one of the others that we support. So that's sort of the first step. And then we see organizations sort of crank it down one level at a time so they can gauge that impact, right? This is really important. If you want to gauge it without blocking users, you can also use our compliance policies have non-compliant actions. So you can very simply start with sending users email when their threat level escalates. So that way it's not going to a straight block. So you have a lot of mechanisms there, like Laura sort of described. But just like everything, you shouldn't turn it to the most restrictive setting on day 0 and expect happy times, because you got to figure out what your organizational requirements are with compliance. I mean, compliance is one of those things where you have to sort of wade into the pool. Don't just jump in head first in the deep end when there's no lifeguard on duty. That's not great. Okay. So Mike, anything you want to add to that conversation?
Yeah.
A lot in this space. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's kind of the cornerstone of everything we do in management. And it's a major portion of IT, and being mindful of thinking about, we want to make sure that we're not impacting end users, but then sometimes you do need to impact end users depending on what's going on their device. We see this a lot with conditional access and compliance. I know there's a zero trust session later today where we'll have an AMA and we'll have Clay who talks about this all the time, where it's great to have a compliance state and know your compliance stance, but if you don't have it tied up to something for automated protection, it really relies on humans going and looking at reporting. And at that point, they're making a judgment call. And so if you have a system set up where, you're blocking things when they become potentially malicious, and you're allowing things when everything's good, then you take a lot of that out, and you drive down your response time and things like that. And we all know it's painful, and the escalations are around customer pain when these things maybe trigger and block people and stuff like that. But it's always good to keep in mind, like, the core mission of why we're here and trying to protect things. It's really good to have the reporting and know where we're at and stuff, but we got to make sure that we're taking action on those things. And so maybe medium risk is like risky enough to block access to your core business essential information and data and stuff. So think about what people have access to, and then what friction you're willing to. I mean, we have this conversation in EPM all the time for endpoint privilege management. What's the right level of friction so that folks can still do their job, right? Like, we're not a turned off machine is very secure, but let's not go that far. So it's a good conversation to have. It's a good thought exercise to run through on, like, what would happen if we put it to medium? Are we comfortable with medium risk devices accessing our corporate information?
Yeah, some would say that a powered off machine is the most secure machine.
So secure.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. It's not the most usable, turns out, but yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
You were mentioning reporting, right?
Yes.
So we have another question here from tech community around result and setup policy, GP result, Intune. Mike, what's the deal, man? Like, how do we understand what's applied to Intune devices, and sort of what's sort of the history there with supporting sort of result and setup policy, and why is it in various states in Intune? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Result and setup policy, or RSAP, if folks don't know, it comes from GPO, essentially group policy, where you can go on a machine and run GP result and get a result of all the machine and user settings that have been set down on the machine and scripts that have run and that kind of stuff. And so it's a good spot to sort of think about everything that's happened on a device. In Intune, we have reporting. And once a device checks in, and when a device checks in, it basically says, here's my device, here's my user, give me all the information for all the policy you have for me. And that sort of trickles up through this grouping magic to figure out, all the policies and what groups are assigned to, and then breaking open those groups to find the members and all those things. And we calculate it before the device checks in so that we can do it quickly. But for you to actually view it, the reports are there. I think a lot of the feedback around the RSAP is that you have to, like, you can look at device configuration for a single device and see a lot of the stuff. And we did smush the endpoint security policy and device config policy together a couple of years ago, actually. But you do still have to sort of click through the policies and see the results for each one. If you see system account, that just means it's a user list check-in. It's something we keep around, and we've heard feedback around. We have some ideas on some ways we can make that a little easier. You may see that at different timestamps they had different states, so don't worry about that too much. But getting back to the core of how to go see it, we've heard the feedback for a long time. Explorer now has capabilities where you can ask about certain settings, you can ask about certain devices, you can ask about certain policy, trends in policy, things like that. And so we're looking at ways to take those reports, which today are a little bit rigid based on how, you know, the data is structured and how it gets pulled back up, and it's associated with policies and less so of like groups, like clicking on a group and seeing all the policies assigned to it, which is some of the feedback that we get. We can kind of get there through Explorer, which has, you know, a lot of great queries around policy, and I know that those are always expanding. But then also, if you're using Copilot, and I'm going to come full circle around to non-Copilot solutions, but if you're using Copilot and you look at a setting and you open up and ask, you know, about a setting, you can also ask what policies contain that setting. So if you want to do the reverse, or if you want to start with a setting and see policies, or if you want to start with a device and see all the settings, you can sort of do all those through reporting or through Copilot. And then just as we're investing in Copilot and a lot of these experiences, we're finding areas where we need to go back, and even for humans and for AI in order to reason over policy or reports and stuff like that, we're making small changes and tweaks and discoverability and keyword matching and stuff like that, and different ways to search to make it easier for everyone who's interacting with reports and with policy and things like that. So it's always been in our site for areas that need improvement. I think what folks are missing sometimes is like being able to go and click, well, you have it through reporting, but we get some feedback around RSOP specifically. Always looking for more feedback, like if there's a particular pain point that you feel when you're trying to find out, you know, is it right after you target a policy and it hasn't checked in yet, and you're just trying to do some quick checking, or are you looking for things and you're not seeing them where you think they are? That's the type of policy that really helps us sort of drive that experience forward and make sure that it's working for you for what you need to get your job done.
Yeah, I'll also add a couple of things to that, just coming from the core integration that we have with Defender. I think some of the things that feed into this question are for scenarios that you're trying to achieve of, okay, I applied a bunch of settings. I want to make sure that they're actually hitting the device, just to have that confidence, and also know that if there's other sources like GP, or you're coming from a third-party migration, to make sure that, yes, I've targeted my Intune policy, but I want to make sure that if there's a conflict, that I know it's actually effective on the device. So a couple of other places that we're investing in with Defender. One of them, which is a feature that is going to be releasing soon, is called controlled configuration. And that's where we can actually make it such that you as the IT admin can sort of enroll your devices to a controlled configuration mode. And that will actually send a signal to Defender to say any Defender settings that are coming from Intune are the source, sort of in a hierarchy. We are going to ignore other sources that might be applying the same AV policy or ASR policy. We're only going to apply the one that's coming from Intune. And that's super, super powerful to really make sure that if there's legacy sources going to that device, or in migration scenarios, just for sort of enhanced protection, that you get that sort of confirmation that the Intune control is the one that is taking effect. So that is something that is on our roadmap, and you'll sort of see in the next couple of quarters, to, again, just make sure that the application and the effective source is in a predictable state. And then sort of on the other hand of viewing your reporting for, okay, I've applied these policies, I want to see the actual review of how they're being applied. Some of our key integration parts with Defender, sort of leading into what Mike was saying, is around having more sources into Copilot so that you can sort of do your querying or use the Explorer to see and ask questions based on the data that we get. As we put more Intune data in there, we're also considering correlating that data with other products and services like Defender. So we want to keep that theme of being able to leverage Defender data as well, and sort of use Intune data to draw insights and get answers to questions that you're asking. So Defender has a ton of health data that they get from the client. What version is this? Is it up to date? Do I have an Intune policy applied? Is controlled configuration in effect? Those are sort of the questions you can ask and take action on from those. And one other thing that I'll mention is Defender is looking to actually expand the type of data that they get and show up to admins. One thing that is coming down the line is being able to actually see what effective controls are on the device. So they show in their portal right now a report called Effective Settings, which will tell you for a given device the AV configurations that are present on the device and the source of it. So that, again, is super, super powerful. You can see I've set this AV setting. It's coming from GPO. I don't want it to come from GPO. I want it to come from Intune. I'm going to put controlled config into effect, and then again have sort of that full end-to-end confidence and predictability that what I'm setting is there on the device. So we have all these different sort of avenues and places for data, and then just making it super easy to access that, draw insights, and then take action. That's a really core theme in our shared partnership, and then thinking with all the co-pilot scenarios that are super powerful. So really, really excited about that. And as Mike mentioned, it's been really in the forefront for a long time. So we want to make sure we keep investing there.
Awesome. I think this actually leads into the next question, which is from Lorenz. It might actually be Francophone, so it might be Laurent. But in a mixed environment, they have Entra ID and hybrid joined and a few BYOD. This is like a common misconception, Laura. Like, I think you probably get this a lot too. You know, what's the recommended baseline policy stack when I have Intune and Defender so we avoid overlapping controls? Like, how do you decide what belongs in Intune versus what belongs in Defender? And I think we probably get this a lot since we've brought the settings management into the Defender portal. So maybe you could give them a quick 5-second, well, maybe 10-second, view of, you know, when you set stuff in the Defender portal, what's actually happening, and you know, how should they think about the conflicts, if any, between the two portals?
Yeah, so we sort of talked about the platforms and sort of management states that are supported through security management policies. The TLDR of that is we support them all. And we set up the policy creation and management experience such that you really just have to be mindful of your targeting, and your devices will get the settings that you set up. We've made it super, super easy for admins that are coming from the Intune portal or Defender portal to view, manage, and create these policies that are specific to security scenarios. So we've actually done a sort of replication of the endpoint security blade that exists in Intune into Defender, so that the same policy list, the same creation process, the same is there in Intune and Defender, so that you can access and see, I have these AV policies applied to these devices, and sort of the access is there for both portals. So the answer to that is, if you're coming from Intune, if you're coming from Defender, it doesn't matter. We're using the same sources and methods to view and apply policy, regardless of which management portal you're using.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like, you know, since it looks a little bit different, I think people sort of assume that, like, hey, listen, I'm setting this AV policy in the Defender portal, but like you said, it's all just going to Intune at the end of the day for enforcement, either through the MD attached channel or through MDM. So I
even think now you'll even see it if you create policy in Defender. You'll even see it in your device configuration policy blade list on like proper main Intune. We got a lot of feedback over the years about like things being in different areas. I mean, endpoint security at its core was, let's build something that looks and feels like security product and is security product in Intune that's a little bit separate from device config. So it's sort of your one-stop shop for all your security stuff, and you can, you know, customize your RBAC and your permissions so that, you know, you can have your security folks like creating and managing policy live in sort of the same tool. And we've even gotten feedback of like that was a little too siloed. And so even now, like, it's all the same policy backend. Everything's been migrated over from the endpoint security side. Everything is sort of like all working off the same thing. So it's cool to see today, right? Because I think the three of us, we've been in this for a while. You can create a policy in Defender. It shows up in endpoint security. It also shows up in your device configuration blade. It's the same name across all of them, the same settings across all of them, the same values across all of them, the same groups across all of them. So that you're not telling like 2 or 3 different stories. You're not missing some stuff that someone might have created that's enforcing policy on some of your devices that you're responsible for managing.
Yeah, and I think that's a core theme of what we're looking to invest in is reducing the friction, make it super seamless, and sort of break down the silos and barriers of I'm using Intune or Defender. If you're trying to achieve the scenario, we're going to try to make it as easy as possible to do that.
That's awesome. And that feeds into some work that you're doing too, Laura, right around making sure that these Defender policies have their own role-based access controls. So even though, you know, I mean, maybe you can talk a little bit about that. Like, even though, you know, I can see the policy, I may be able to restrict it so only the security team can edit them, right? Based on that. Like, can you talk a little bit about how you're focusing on that?
Yeah, for sure. So for access to security policies in Defender or Intune, we have specific steps to grant role access to do that. And once that's enabled, you can sort of go to town and do all your management of those policies in Defender. But even further from that, if you're in the endpoint security blade, we have a sort of high-level permission set to access all of the security workload types, gated under one control. We've actually taken steps to break that out to the specific workload types. So having your own permission set for AV policy versus ASR policies versus firewall, sort of all of the main workload categories that are relevant to the teams that might be managing those policy types. So we have sort of broken out a couple of them already in the endpoint security blade, but we're continuing that and sort of finishing so that the outcome is that I can selectively choose who has access to more of those granular RBAC controls, so that I can operate with a sort of more lockdown process and teams only have access to what's relevant to them.
Yeah, that's so awesome. I remember when I was working every day with you guys on this space, like, people would say, it's great that my AV policies are in Intune, but I want every IT admin who can modify policy to modify them. Like, this is crazy. And now when I have the role-based access stuff that you're working on, which seems simple, you just, add a setting, some magic, you engineer it and then you ship it. But there's actually a lot more that goes into restricting access than that. I mean, now I can say, hey, you can view these policies, these AV policies, but you can't edit them. So I think that's sort of like the best of both worlds, right? Because now as an IT admin, I can see the configuration, but as a security admin, I know that, like, hey, nobody can mess with my configuration except for the security team. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and all of that is also supported by our scope tagging and sort of grouping concepts that are across Intune. So again, this is just more granular controls, giving you more flexibility.
Yeah,
allows you to minimize privilege and move towards least privilege access.
Yes.
I think I already plugged the Zero Trust session that's coming up a little later today, but if anyone missed it, there's a second one. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. I guess we're going to pivot back based on the audience's feedback here, back into Defender Risk Land, which is awesome. So I'm going to take these questions out of order. The first question is, actually, I'm going to squeeze them together. The first question, well, actually, I don't know. I haven't figured it out yet. We'll see what happens. Can we apply a compliance policy for risk level if the computer has Defender but is not in Intune? It is managed from a different MDM. So I think what they're asking is, can I use conditional access policy to gate based on Defender device risk when I'm not using Intune as an MDM? Either of you want to take that question, or I can take a shot at answering it, whatever works for you all.
This is an onion peeling question, because there's more questions about what do you mean by MD? Like, do you have zero Intune at all and you're trying to just do your compliance policy? Or are you thinking like, I'm managing through GPO and I've got, but I have Defender on the box, which falls into that, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint land of, Defender's managing Defender on the box, and you have Intune policy that's technically doing that. So this could go in a lot of ways, but I think at the offset, I would say, yeah, you can still manage Defender. If you're not using Intune, you can use Intune to do that. Depends on what you mean by like using Intune for MDM. And then you can still have the compliance state written onto the device and use that in conditional access. And then I'll hand off, because I am fuzzy on the answer if risk score is directly a conditional access property. It's been a little while since I've looked at some of those. I think it is, but I don't want to authoritatively say that.
Yeah, you got to think. You got to think about. It's a great answer, Mike. You got to think about. Who owns the compliance bit, right? So there's a bit in using maybe overgeneralizing this. There's a bit in the directory is compliant. That's a Boolean. That's either true or false, and somebody has authority over that bit. When a device is managed by Intune, Intune has authority over that bit in the directory. So now when you start talking about how you influence that bit, if Intune owns it, then anything that can be input into Intune, like risk score, can be used to influence the calculation of that bit. If you're using a third-party MDM or a different MDM or no MDM or some other process, I don't know, the key here you should ask is, can Defender risk be funneled into that process? I've seen a lot of custom solutions where people use the risk score in Defender to ultimately gate access. But this really comes back to, the solution you're using that owns that bit. Can it take Defender risk into account? Defender has no hard dependency on Intune for its capability. Our integrations make it way better, I think, because you can easily deploy security policy with only the flip of a few toggles, and we're deliberately trying to make that work. But Defender is also able to be used as a standalone security product, and you can integrate with it in the same way that Intune integrates with it, for different capabilities. So, short answer, you should ask the person managing your compliance bit if they can take the Defender risk score. And there's a bunch of different ways to get the Defender risk out of Defender, which is great.
The thing I love about your answer, Matt, is it kind of like harkens back. I wasn't expecting flashbacks to Exchange on-prem ABQ rules this morning, but here we are. A lot of quarantine rules, which are like manually turned on and off. It's cool to think about how automated all of this has become. From folks have been around since like manually flipping those toggles, but like conceptually it's the same thing. Conceptually, there's a bit somewhere that says you shall or shall not pass, and then what mechanisms and automation do you have behind protecting your corporate data through those switches?
Yeah, completely right. Laura, did you have anything you wanted to add? I know we got the sirens there going off, but go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. New York City is going off.
Someone stuck in the snow.
No, I think you got. If there's follow-up questions on that, feel free, folks, to put in comments. But yeah. So
there was the opposite question too, right? Like managing Intune devices without Defender and having, I think that's the one you're trying to squish in, Matt. And so
yeah, it's kind of like
that one back out.
Yeah. I mean, Defender has like a ton of onboarding options. It's just really how you bootstrap management of your device, right? you can onboard to Defender first. We see a lot of people deploy offboard or onboarding blobs with group policy or another tool that they have, right? And once you're anchored on either Defender or Intune, you can sort of build the integration with the other. So if you go in Defender first, Defender can trigger security management enrollment into Intune. And if you go into Intune first, Intune can easily deploy the onboarding scenario to bring Defender into the picture. So, it's not only for Intune managed devices. Like Defender has some pretty prevalent, like Defender for cloud scenarios where they're protecting cloud assets like servers in the cloud, where you might not necessarily deploy security management policy with Intune for those devices because of their life cycle. They're ephemeral, they're temporary, they spin up, spin down. You have a different way to enforce configurations on those based rather than the typical Intune based scenarios. So Defender is really flexible with how you onboard, how you offboard, and then how you deploy that security policy, which is great. All right, we got a question from Curtis on LinkedIn here. He says, so with Intune, Defender for Cloud, M365, where is the overlap with Purview? As long as your environment is stood up using CAF, WAF, I don't know what those acronyms mean.
They're at the bottom, spelled out.
Oh, I see. With proper management groups. That's good that you spelled them out, Curtis, or Heather, whoever added those in, A+ there. With proper management groups that are top down. No, cloud adoption framework and well-architected framework. I'll frame what I think the answer is here, and then I'll have you guys chime in. I think this all comes back to single system of record for users and devices. Entra, the reason we've standardized on Entra is because modeling your users and devices in a singular way, and then having our product consume that architecture downstream has saved a ton of effort for our admins. I mean, just coming from the config manager world, I can remember having to rebuild collections or representations of these grouping structures influenced by all of these different outside sources. So it's, although that gives you great flexibility, that also creates great overhead. And it's also another troubleshooting source. So I love the integration with Entra, and I think Purview does the same thing in terms of targeting in the way that they can consume these sort of mechanisms. And I know, Laura, you're constantly working with the Defender team on how we bring Defender representations and properties back into the directory to facilitate grouping as well, right? So, I think that this is a really great model. It brings friction, right? Because whenever you have a singular source of truth, there's always additional requirements that source of truth may not be able to support that requires some flexibility. But overall, I think that really promotes real ease of use. It allows somebody in HR to move somebody from, the Calgary site to the Miami, Florida site, and everything about that move from policy targeting to Purview targeting to where they fall in different reporting structures all changes with it, which is really awesome. And it's warmer in Miami, so the employee is ultimately happy. So that's good as well. Anything you two want to add to that one, or any questions? Things we should cover?
I think what you mentioned on having Defender sort of speak that same language, because I know Defender has their own grouping mechanism. We are sort of working on making that seamless so that those Defender groups speak the same language and can help that person migrating to Miami get their Defender policies. So that's something that we're also looking to add to that same source of truth and make a lot easier, which I know has been a big point of feedback from our community. So we are working on it.
And I'll add there too, because we added we rolled something out last year, I think 2024 at Ignite, might have been at Secure, around endpoint privilege management automatically checking for an elevation request. Someone wants to elevate something, we hand that file hash directly over to Defender and get a risk score back. On the Purview angle, if you've got Purview set up, that's some of the other stuff that we're looking at. Is that kind of opened our eyes to, well, there's other stuff that you want to go look at for risk score like Purview. Like maybe it's not a malicious app that they're trying to elevate, but maybe the user is in a state where they're triggered for trying to exfiltrate data or something like that. And so That's something that we're sort of is on our radar, is where do we want to pull in more risk signal, and we're seeing more and more that Purview has a lot of that. And then also in like the compliance management space, or if you're using like it's called Compliance Manager in Purview, how we can maybe help with some of that signal. There's some there today where like if they see a requirement, they'll look into Intune and see if things are set up and sort of mark that in your Compliance Manager. But we're looking sort of investigating some tighter integrations there where we can help each other out, especially in a cloud adopted framework or a well architected framework. So sounds like you got it already set up, which is the first point, right? It's get it all set up and then you're ready to go.
Yeah, I can be quoted as saying generally things are easier to manage when you know where they are. This is generally one of Matt's beautiful outcomes. Yeah, this is great. We got one last question from Cheddar Chad 12 on Tech Community. He asks, do you recommend the security baselines in Intune? And I'm going to expand on this. When are security baselines the right choice? And when might you consider creating your own custom objects? Because I think that's more or less what he's asking. So I don't know which one of you want to start on that one. You both have deep knowledge on security baselines and how we create them. So please go ahead.
Yeah, I could talk all day on security baselines, but I know this is the last question, so this is good timing. Security baselines are great. They have all the content that you need. When we rebuilt the policy engine like 5 years ago now, really the cornerstone was we don't want you to have to know that a setting is in a certain template in order to go turn it on. We wanted to rebuild the policy engine so that you have settings catalog to go build whatever you want into one policy. Make sure that you have templates so that if you want to go look at, BitLocker or AV or firewall, all the settings that you need for that scenario are all in one place. And then we wanted to build baselines to sort of say, well, here's where you can start if you don't know how to set these and you just want to have all the recommendations there. And what we found is that with baselines sometimes, if you're already set up or you're already in an environment where there's policy being sent from Intune, you run the risk of creating conflict by sort of blindly applying the baseline. If you're brand new or you're coming from GPO and you're just trying to get that baseline deployed, and of course, I think originally too, we would sort of mark you as red if you deviated from recommendations in the baseline. Now we say, you know what, good. If you have a reason to turn off some of these settings, maybe they're more impactful than what you're looking for. Maybe you're managing it through something else. Maybe you have it in another policy. Then set it to not configured in the baseline and don't worry about it. But really the goal of the baseline is to give you all of the Microsoft recommendations all in one place. And if you haven't looked in a while, the list of available baselines has grown over the years. We have baselines for Edge, we have baselines for M365 apps, baselines for Defender. So even if you're not sure, you could even use it as a reference to see what values should be set. But be aware of conflict that might get created. We've gotten better at marking those conflicts when they do get created, but just be careful with that. That's really the only case where I wouldn't recommend it is if you already have a ton of policy already set up and you're sort of looking at a layered approach. That's something we still have some work on to go do. And then also some of the new Copilot scenarios we're making it easier so that you can ask questions about recommended settings and stuff like that. So stay tuned there.
Awesome. And then Laura, maybe you could mention how the content comes into the baselines. How do we create those baselines? Who owns the content that's in them, and sort of how do we go about updating them?
Yeah, so I think Mike mentioned we have a whole bunch, I think 8 or 10 in there. And so all of the baselines that we surface right now are from the internal Microsoft product security experts who carefully curate the set of settings and the recommendations that go into each of those baselines. So the team that comes from Windows, from HoloLens, from Defender, they are the security experts that come up with that content, and we work with them to provide the latest version of that baseline template, so it's just easily accessible through Intune. And there's actually versioning controls that are in place so that there's an updated version of the baseline that's available for you to easily do a quick diff and apply the new version to your targeted groups. So we have pretty close relationship with those experts curating the content. And we're always working with them to make sure day 0 or day 1, we have the latest versions available, and continuing to expand that to other groups. So that is coming from the experts themselves and using the Intune policy to actually do the enforcement and deployment.
That's awesome. All right. Well, this hour is going to come to an end. Next, we have an AMA that'll be open on Tech Community. With
Q&A for this AMA is open till Friday.
Well, hold on.
But
One
yeah.
thing at a time here, Dano. Let me plug the next session, then we can figure out the rest of it, okay? So, our friends Nicole, Iris, and Dave are going to go ahead and help you deploy apps like a pro, taking all your questions about app deployment, etc. That'll be, if you need the link for that, that's aka.ms/AMA/manage apps. I think Heather usually reminds me not to say /, but this is okay. And then this AMA, the Tech Community, will be open until Friday at 12 p.m. Pacific. Feel free, if you're watching this recorded or you had a question we didn't answer, feel free to put your questions there. We'll be monitoring and responding there as things come in. So from all of us here in Intune World, we appreciate you tuning in. For my friends Mike and Laura, thank you very much, and we'll see you all later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.